In the quiet of our home, the memories of Amy, our only daughter, echoed off the walls. She was always more firecracker than flower, pushing boundaries and testing limits. As a dentist, I've seen my share of pain, but nothing quite compares to the ache of a child pulling away. My husband, John, a seasoned cop, always had a way of smoothing things over, but even he was at a loss when Amy packed up and left with that rock musician, her teenage rebellion reaching its peak. "John, how did we get here?" I asked one evening, staring at the empty chair Amy once occupied at our dinner table. One day she's sneaking out to concerts, the next, she's gone without a trace. John sighed, his eyes heavy with the same unsaid questions. "She's always been wild, Martha. Like a storm, you can't predict or tame it. But she's still our girl." But as days turned into months, with nothing but silence from Amy, the weight of her absence grew heavier. It wasn't until a photograph landed in our mailbox that we saw her again, not in person, but in a wedding picture, looking defiantly happy next to a man with a guitar and tattoos. No invitation, no call, just a snapshot of the life she chose over us. I remember my hands shaking as I held the photo, the hurt a tangible thing between us. "Look at her, John." Not even a note, just this picture. "She's made her choice, hasn't she?" John, ever the rock, tried to calm the storm brewing in me. "Maybe she's trying to reach out in her own way, Martha. It's a start, right?" But his words did little to soothe the sting of rejection. We continued on, our home feeling larger and lonelier by the day. Work was a distraction, patients and procedures filling the void left by Amy's laughter and chaos. Months had worn into a year with no word from Amy, and just when the silence seemed permanent, our computer pinged a Skype call. It was Amy, her face filling the screen, looking so different yet painfully familiar. "Mom, Dad, I need your help," she said, the edges of her voice ragged with wear. John and I exchanged a glance, the kind that speaks volumes without a word. "Amy, what's going on?" I asked, my heart hammering against my chest. She hesitated, her eyes darting away before locking back onto the screen. It's a lot. I've got a baby now, a little girl. And things, well, they aren't great. I need money, Mom, $1,000 a month." John's brow furrowed, his cop instincts on alert. "A grandkid? Amy, slow down. Why do you need the money?" She bit her lip, a nervous habit from childhood. "I just do, Dad. Please, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious." We sat in silence, the weight of her plea hanging heavy. Finally, I nodded, my decision firm, despite the whirlwind of questions. "All right, Amy. We'll help. But please, talk to us. What's been happening?" She looked down, a tear tracing her cheek. "I can't. Not now. Just, thank you. This means everything." The call ended abruptly, leaving John and I staring at a blank screen. "What do you think, John? Did we just make a mistake?" I murmured, the doubt creeping in. He shook his head, his hand finding mine. "No, Martha. She's our daughter, and she's in trouble. It's our job to help, no questions asked." "But a grandchild, John. A whole year, and she's kept this from us. What else don't we know?" I couldn't keep the tremble from my voice. "We'll find out, love. For now, let's just be there for her. However she'll let us," he replied, his voice a steady anchor in the storm. The days that followed were a blur of bank transfers and uneasy silence. I kept busy, the clinic a welcome distraction, but every time I came home, I half expected Amy to be there, waiting with her child. But the house remained quiet, our lives suspended in a state of waiting and worry. One evening, as we sat in the living room, the air thick with unsaid fears, John broke the silence. "She'll reach out again, Martha. When she's ready." I nodded, clinging to his optimism like a lifeline. "I hope you're right. I just I want to hold my grandchild, to tell Amy it's going to be okay. We will, love. We will, he assured me, though I saw the shadow of his own doubts flickering in his eyes. I whispered a silent prayer for my daughter and granddaughter, wherever they were. The plea had opened old wounds and new fears, but it had also rekindled a flame of hope. We were still a family, fractured and distant, but connected by unbreakable bonds of love and the unwavering promise to be there for each other, no matter what. It was one of those early mornings, when the cold bites at your bones, the world outside frosted and still. John and I were nestled in the warmth of our home, sipping coffee, the silence comfortable, if not a bit heavy with unspoken thoughts about Amy. That's when the sharp knock came, shattering the calm like a stone through glass. John and I exchanged a startled look, the same question in our eyes, who could it be at this hour? He stood up, moving towards the door, while I followed close behind, a knot of worry tightening in my stomach. He swung the door open and there, on our doorstep, was a sight that knocked the breath from me. Amy, thinner and more worn than I remembered, clutching a small bundle wrapped in blankets. Her eyes, red and swollen from crying, met mine, and it was as if the years of silence fell away in an instant. Amy? Oh my God, Amy! I cried out, rushing forward to wrap her in an embrace, the cold forgotten. Mom, Dad. I'm so sorry. Can we come in? Her voice was a whisper, hoarse and fragile. Of course, come in. John's voice was firm, guiding her gently inside as I quickly shut the door against the cold. Once inside, Amy unwrapped the bundle, revealing a tiny, sleeping face, peaceful despite the chaos. This is your granddaughter, she said, her voice breaking. Tears streamed down my face as I looked at the baby, so innocent and unaware of the storm she'd been born into. She's beautiful, Amy. What's her name? Amy hesitated, a shadow crossing her face. Lily. Her name's Lily. John, ever the practical one, sprung into action. You both look frozen. Martha, let's get them warmed up. I'll make some food. As I helped Amy out of her coat, the threadbare fabric and worn shoes didn't escape my notice. She was shivering, her body frail and tired. I ushered her to the living room, piling blankets around her and the baby. John brought in food, setting it before Amy, who ate with a hunger that spoke of too many missed meals. Lily, now awake, watched with wide, curious eyes, her little hand wrapped around my finger. Once Amy had eaten her fill, she looked up at us, her eyes holding a depth of pain and regret. I need to tell you everything. It's been so bad, worse than you can imagine. John and I sat, our hearts heavy with dread and love, ready to listen. As she spoke, her voice trembled with the weight of her story, each word painting a picture of a life unraveled, of dreams turned to nightmares. When she finally finished, the room was heavy with silence. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. Amy, we're here now. You're safe, both of you. John nodded, his face set in a determined line. We'll take care of you. Whatever it takes. Amy broke down then, tears streaming down her face, a mix of relief and sorrow. I'm so sorry. I was so stupid, so proud. I should have come back sooner. I pulled her into a hug, rocking her gently. Shoo, it's okay. You're home now. We'll fix this, together. Once Amy had settled a bit, Lily sleeping soundly in a makeshift bed we'd cobbled together, she began to unravel the story we'd been missing. John and I sat across from her, our hearts heavy, bracing ourselves for what was to come. Mom, Dad. I don't even know where to start. Everything's been a mess since the day I left with him, Amy began, her fingers twisting a loose thread on the blanket. Just start from the beginning, sweetheart. We're here to listen, I urged gently, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Amy took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the sleeping form of Lily. It was all good at first, you know? Exciting, even. But then, after we got married, things changed. He changed. The music gigs dried up, and he started drinking, a lot. And then... Her voice trailed off, a shiver running through her. John leaned forward, his face a mask of concern. And then what, Amy? She looked up, tears glistening in her eyes. Then he started getting angry, at everything. At me. It wasn't long before he started hitting me. A sharp gasp escaped my lips, my hand flying to my mouth. John's jaw clenched, his hands forming fists on his knees. That bastard, he muttered under his breath. Amy continued, the words pouring out now, a floodgate opened. I thought I could handle it, that I could make it stop. But then I got pregnant with Lily, and everything got worse. He didn't work, just drank and yelled and more. I was scared, all the time. The room felt impossibly heavy, each word a weight added to our already burdened hearts. Why didn't you come to us, Amy? Why didn't you tell us? I asked, my voice a mix of pain and frustration. I was ashamed, Mom. Ashamed and scared. I thought I'd made my bed and had to lie in it. But when Lily was born, I realized I couldn't let her grow up in that. That's when I called you for the money. It was the only way I could think of to keep us afloat. John stood abruptly, pacing the room. And his parents? What role did they play in all this? Amy's lips quivered as she spoke. They were just as bad, in their own way. His mom, she would make me do all the housework, watch every penny. If I did anything wrong, she'd take it out on me, on Lily. They all would. I reached across, taking her hand in mine. You're safe now, Amy. You and Lily. We'll take care of you. Amy nodded, a frail smile on her lips. I know, Mom. That's why I came here. I knew if anyone would help us, it would be you. John nodded, his face set in a grim line. Tell us how you managed it, Amy. We need to know everything to protect you. She took a deep breath, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee mug. It wasn't easy. I had to wait for the right moment. His parents were out, and he was passed out drunk, like usual. I grabbed Lily, some clothes, and whatever cash I could find. I didn't even have a car seat, just wrapped her in blankets and ran. I shuddered, imagining my daughter and granddaughter in such peril. Oh, Amy, that's so dangerous. But you're here now, that's what matters. She continued, her eyes distant as she recounted the escape. I hitched a ride to the nearest bus station. People must have seen the desperation in my eyes, no one asked too many questions. Each mile away from that house felt like a tiny victory. John's hand found mine under the table, a silent message of solidarity. And no one followed you? You were sure you weren't followed? Amy shook her head. I was careful, Dad. I know you taught me to be observant. I made sure we weren't followed. I just couldn't stay there a moment longer, not with Lily. I stood up, moving to the stove to busy myself with making more coffee, the actions mundane but necessary to keep the tremors at bay. You're brave, Amy. So brave. We'll make sure you never have to go back there. The day passed in a flurry of activity, securing the house, making appointments with lawyers and therapists, anything and everything to ensure Amy and Lily's safety and well-being. John was on the phone most of the day, his voice a low rumble of barely contained fury and action. As night fell, Amy sat on the living room floor, Lily crawling around her, a scene so normal yet charged with the undercurrents of their recent ordeal. I can't thank you enough, both of you. I feel like I'm finally breathing again. John looked up from his paperwork, his gaze softening. You're our daughter, Amy. There's nothing we wouldn't do for you and Lily. I sat down beside her, the carpet soft beneath me. We meant it when we said forever, Amy. Forever means through the hard times too. She leaned against me, her body weary but her spirit flickering with the start of something new, hope, perhaps, or the beginning of healing. "I know, Mom. I know." As we settled in for the night, the house felt different, as if the very walls were bracing to protect its inhabitants. Amy and Lily slept in the guest room, their breaths soft and even in the quiet. John and I lay in bed, our hands clasped between us, a silent vow to face whatever came next together. The escape to safety was just the beginning, but as I drifted off to sleep, I knew we were ready for it. Ready to fight, to protect, and to heal. Our family, once broken, was mending, one day, one moment at a time. With resolve hardening in our hearts, John and I drove to the address Amy had tearfully provided. The house loomed ahead, shabby and forlorn, a stark contrast to the warm, loving home we had left. "Ready?" John asked, his voice a low rumble of contained anger. I nodded, bracing myself for what was to come. We walked up to the decrepit door and knocked firmly. Shuffling feet approached from inside, and the door creaked open to reveal Amy's husband, a picture of neglect and disdain. "We need to see Amy and the baby," John demanded, his gaze steely. The husband, with a dismissive snort, replied, "They're sleeping." "What do you want at this hour?" The blatant lie made my blood boil. "Sleeping? Don't play dumb. Amy's been with us since yesterday. She told us everything," I snapped, my voice sharp with fury. Behind him, his parents appeared, their expressions sour and defensive. "What's all this about?" "Our daughter-in-law is fine, just sleeping off her tantrums," the mother sneered, a vile attempt at nonchalance. John stepped closer, his presence imposing. "You think we're fools? Amy's safe from your abuse now. She's at our house, and she's told us everything." The trio exchanged nervous glances, the facade crumbling. "You can't prove anything," the father blustered, trying to regain some ground. Without a word, John reached into his coat and flashed his police badge. The effect was immediate. Their faces drained of color, their previous arrogance replaced by fear. "We're just a family trying to get by," the mother whimpered, her bravado gone. John's voice was cold, the anger controlled but palpable. "A family that preys on its weakest members? I don't think so. You'll be hearing from us, and from the authorities." We turned and left them there, standing in their doorway, the reality of their situation sinking in. As we drove away, the weight of what we had started hung heavy in the air. Amy, holding Lily close, met us as we walked in. Her eyes, filled with a mix of hope and fear, searched ours for answers. "They're scared now, Amy. Scared of the consequences. You and Lily are safe," John assured her, his hand resting on her shoulder. The night closed in around us, the house a sanctuary against the darkness outside. As we settled in, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief. The first step had been taken, the demons confronted. And though the journey was far from over, we had faced it together, a united front against the past and whatever future might bring. Our family, once fractured, was finding its way back, one truth, one moment at a time. The morning after confronting Amy's in-laws, John and I sat at our kitchen table, a silent agreement between us. Today we would ensure justice for Amy and Lily. John, with his years of experience on the force, made calls, his tone official and stern, setting the wheels of justice in motion. "Amy, can you tell us everything again?" "The authorities will need your statement," John said as he prepared a notepad, his expression serious but encouraging. Amy nodded, a determined glint in her eyes, despite the shadows of her recent past. "Yes, I'll tell them everything. They need to know what he did, what they all did." As she recounted her story, her voice trembled but never broke. She was a portrait of courage, a stark contrast to the frightened girl who had appeared on our doorstep. "And when Lily was born, things got worse. I was isolated, controlled. I couldn't let her grow up in that." I reached over, squeezing her hand. "You're doing the right thing, Amy. They won't hurt you or Lily ever again. Hours passed, filled with calls and visits from officers and lawyers, each step a move towards accountability and protection. Finally, with Amy's statement recorded and the legal process underway, we had a moment to breathe. "Mom, Dad, will they go to jail?" Amy asked, her eyes searching ours for assurance. John nodded, his voice firm. "They're facing charges of abuse and extortion. It's a strong case, especially with your testimony. They won't be free to hurt anyone else." The relief in Amy's eyes was palpable. She hugged Lily to her, whispering words of love and safety to her daughter. The day turned to evening, and as we sat together, a sense of calm settled over the house. "I can't believe it's finally happening," Amy murmured, a small smile touching her lips. "It's only the beginning, sweetheart. But we'll be with you every step of the way," I reassured her, my heart swelling with pride for her bravery. John stood, looking out the window into the growing darkness. "They'll learn that you don't mess with family. Not without consequences." We sat in quiet solidarity, the trials of the past few days bonding us in ways we couldn't have imagined. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, there was a sense of hope, a light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. As night fell and we prepared for bed, I checked on Amy and Lily, sleeping peacefully in the guest room. The sight of them, so serene, was a balm to my weary soul. We had faced the demons, and though the scars remained, we were healing, moving forward together. As the days turned into weeks, the dark cloud that had loomed over our family started to dissipate. Amy, now officially divorced and free from the man and the in-laws who had caused her so much pain, was finding her footing again. The legal proceedings had seen her husband and his parents imprisoned for their violence and extortion, a fitting end to their reign of terror. During breakfast one morning, as we all sat together, the atmosphere was lighter, almost buoyant. "You know, I've been thinking," I began, watching Lily attempt to spoon-feed herself, "how far we've come. It's like we've stepped into the light after such a long time in the dark." Amy, with a newfound strength in her eyes, smiled. "Yeah, Mom. It's like I'm finally waking up. The divorce, the trial, it's all behind me now. I can actually look forward to the days ahead." John, always the backbone of our family, nodded in agreement. "That's right. We're all moving forward now, stronger and wiser." Lily's giggles punctuated our conversation, a reminder of the innocence and joy that had returned to our home. As the day unfolded, Amy and I found ourselves in the garden, planting new flowers, a symbolic gesture of our new beginnings. "Mom, can you believe how much Lily's grown?" Amy remarked, her hands deep in the earth. I smiled, handing her a seedling. "She's going to be as strong and beautiful as her mother, and as resilient as her grandma, too." As evening approached, John joined us outside, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. "Look at our little family, Martha. This is what life's all about." I leaned into him, my heart full of gratitude. "Yes, it is. A new beginning, a fresh start for all of us." Dinner was a lively affair, with Amy sharing her plans for the future, her voice tinged with excitement. "I'm thinking of going back to school, maybe even starting my own business. I want Lily to have a life filled with possibilities." John raised his glass, his eyes shining with pride. "To new beginnings, to family, and to justice. May we always find strength in each other." We toasted to our future, the sound of our glasses clinking a sweet symphony of hope and determination. As the night drew in, I tucked Lily into bed, watching as Amy sat beside her, a serene look on her face. I whispered a silent prayer of thanks as I turned off the light, grateful for the second chance we'd been given. As I lay next to John, his presence a constant source of comfort, I knew that our journey hadn't been easy, but it had brought us here, to this moment of peace and togetherness.